welcome back, loony listeners. You are listening to Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast. I'm up here in the Mooncopter flying high in the air in the night sky, and we have another ISLA comic books special for you. So, just sit back, relax, and get your Khonshu on. Hello, loony listeners. Yes, we are still up high in the Mooncopter here, and I actually forgot to mention as well, of course, we have a special guest for our ISLA comic book special this time. We've previously had Sons of the Dragon and Connor, and we had Rick, the Rick Ball special, come over to talk about their favourite comic books. And as we fly high here in the gaping maw of night, I have right beside me David from Signal of Doom. How are you, David?
Hey Ray, hey loony listeners, I'm happy to be here, I'm loving the copter, we're up so high in the night sky.
We are, so look, I think before we have a good chat, Dave, why don't I just open this door? Okay, and if we can just jump down into that pool below, I'll see you in Grant Mansion.
Bye!
See ya! Okay. Oh, that was a refreshing swim there, Dave. Did you make it all right?
Fantastic,
through the
Ray.
Yeah,
I'm refreshed. I'm charged up. I'm ready to go. A bit bracing in the night air, man. You know.
Exactly. We actually went through Moon Knight's secret Grant Mansion entrance, which a lot of loonies will know. It's through his swimming pool, down underground, up through his bedroom. So we're actually in Mark Spector's bedroom now.
I've got one question, Ray.
Yes.
I've got one question already. Where's Marlene? Is she in the bikini? Is she nearby? That's one reason I've come to this mansion.
I had to leave Marlene out of this. I knew that you'd be quite keen to meet her, so she and Mark are away. They're away
that's a shame.
for dinner. We have the mansion.
I'm so happy for them.
we have the mansion to do it to ourselves, but look, we've got to get out of this pool. Look, here's some towels. Let's dry ourselves off. Right. Let's make our way over to the living room. We'll have a stiff drink, and we can get chatting.
Hi, this is Phil Parrish from the Capes and Lunatics podcast, a proud member of the collective, and you're listening to Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast.
I'll have a gin and tonic.
Excellent. Well, hang on. Let me just ring the bell. Samuels? Yep. Hi, Samuels. Yeah, a gin and tonic for Dave. I'll have just get me a Scotch whiskey, thanks. Neat. Thank you very much.
Where's Frenchie?
Yeah, Frenchie's tending to his restaurant at the moment with his partner Rob. So
man, everyone's out. Everyone's out.
Well, Frenchie was driving the helicopter, the Mooncopter. So he took off.
Okay.
Yeah. So
he's a busy guy.
So he's busy. The mansion is clear, Ferris Bueller-like, so we can run rampant. But except for Samuels, of course, he's over here. But sorry, welcome, Dave. As we sit down here at Grant Mansion in the living room, great to have you on the show. A big fan of...
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure.
Man, it's a big fan.
You're the Orson Welles of podcasting these days, Ray. So you're doing these fancy things now. It's so cool, man. You're just building a web,
building an empire.
Yeah, one podcast at a time.
But yeah, it's been really cool. Obviously, we've been chatting online, and we actually met up for a Marvel trivia night not that long ago, which was cool to meet for the first time. Followed that quickly.
It was cool, yes. It was lovely to meet you and your fiancée as well. She's lovely lady.
Oh, and great to meet Stu as well. Stu, the main man. He's a brilliant.
The lesser light of Cedar of Doom. You've got the main star now. But there is a co-host that I have as well. But let's not talk about him. Let's keep the attention on D.
Yeah, but I mean, it was great to see you at the trivia night, and not long after that, we joined forces at a table at a comic book swap meet as well. So that was really cool. That was on a Sunday. Look, you cashed in, didn't you? I didn't have much luck.
Yeah, I cleaned up. I had this one guy who bought a whole stack of what was it, BRPD hardbacks that I've never even read or opened. Then he came back a week later and bought all my Hellboy Absolute editions, or whatever they're called, the library editions.
Yeah, his finger was on the
lovely.
Yeah, his finger was on the pulse there. He knew exactly what he was getting, and he was almost just in awe that you were selling them because they were out of print and stuff. So that was good to see. And there was that little young kid as well that kept on coming back.
Yeah.
And
what a sweetheart. Michelle and I discussed this. Like, what a sweetheart. Came up, had only read one comic before and bought one comic, and then I sold him a couple of Spider-Man trades. I gave them a kid discount. I mean,
really.
They call me a capitalist swine, but I actually gave the kid discount.
Yeah.
And you know what? And Michelle later said, but you could have given him more. I said, no, he's got to learn that there's like an economy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's got to learn, buying and selling. It can't all be for free.
Oh, you've got to ease into. He's got to ease into it, and it was really chuffed to have gotten those Spider-Mans from. I think they were his first trades ever. He went.
Yeah, no, he's a good kid.
Yeah, he's a good kid. So really good stuff at the comic swap meet. Had a good time there. Had a good chat with you as well. But also
sure. A whole day with me, Ray, it always takes it out of someone. So
didn't you say
you enjoyed
small doses? Didn't you say that, Dave, as well?
Oh, definitely small doses, my friend. Small doses. I'm best in small doses. Even I think that.
Oh well, look, we have got a whole episode dedicated to you, Dave, and obviously we're going to get into your ISLA books. But first off, in front of the warm fireplace here, and with our... thank you, Samuels. Thank you for our drinks.
Oh, Samuels, this is going to go down nicely.
With our fine drinks as well, I wanted to actually cast your mind back, Dave. I ask all the guests as well, cast your mind back. And can you pinpoint when was the first time that you really got into comics? Just be interesting to know.
Well, actually, funnily enough, I took a while, but when I was a little kid, 7, 8 or something, my parents gave me a show bag which had a comic in it, which was probably my first exposure. It was like a werewolf comic. It was kind of like a horror anthology, real mild horror. And I found it fascinating, and I read it like so many times. And I got it like at the Easter show or something, and that's my first memory. A few years later, I was at an airport, and I was obsessed. Like, I watched the Batman show and stuff, and I was obsessed, and somehow just convinced my mother to buy me a Batman and the Outsiders comic. That was the first comic I ever kind of got, and then flash forward a couple more years later, I got into it through some friends. I sort of found out more about it, and I bought an Iron Man comic, and that's when I became fully into it. Like, I bought an Iron Man just randomly. I don't even know why I bought Iron Man. Yeah, but I did.
It was there, probably. That was it. It was just there.
Yeah, and it seemed cool. And they probably didn't have Spider-Man or something. And then I just started buying randomly Marvel comics, and then I got hooked into 2000 AD, and I basically just didn't look back. And I was probably about 13, 14 at the time.
Right. And do you think, like, with that first introduction with that werewolf comic, and you touched upon it as well, did you have any inclinations towards, obviously, like cartoons or video games that kind of got you into that kind of pop culture related to comics? Or
I was definitely interested in a very adjacent. Like I was heavily into like, especially as I got into my teenage years, I was heavily into even role playing games and fantasy books and stuff. Like, and I mean heavily.
Yep.
And actually, I was playing Dungeons and Dragons with sort of friends who were into comics, and they kind of pushed me in the direction, if you know what I mean. Like they mentioned it. That's where I found out Judge Dredd was a character. I really knew nothing. I almost knew nothing about like the actual characters other than the most major ones. But just by being adjacent, I just sort of stumbled into it. Really, there wasn't sort of a plan of attack. But I even remember that horror comic that I bought, like or got given, and the Batman. So I was around it. You know what I mean? I was a heavy reader as well as a kid. I always have been a big reader. So it wasn't. It was more just a case of just waiting until that moment where I suddenly realised I could go to back in those days, you could still get them at the in the newsagent.
Yeah. Oh, that's how I started. Yeah.
And then shortly after that, as I sort of fully got into Marvel, you know how when you really get into comics the first time, you just sort of like just launch yourself at them. Yeah. So Ray, basically, I found out through a friend of mine. That there was this store called Labyrinth, and I was really wet behind the ears. Like I just had no concept of what really I was getting into. Yeah. And I went down to this store, and I was by myself, and I just couldn't. My eyes would have just goggled out of my head looking at comics on every wall. You know, like this was like about 1987,
right? Okay.
And I was a young kid, you know, and I just couldn't believe it. Like it was just like heaven. You know what I mean? And
that would have been amazing.
Yeah, and I saw it was, and I really had no frame of reference. Like I didn't even know who the X-Men were. I just didn't know anything about. But funnily enough, one of the first things I got was Wolverine because he had a solo title that had just started. So it sort of went. I was like Iron Man, and then I was like all the other, basically anything I could read in the newsagent for free, you know, because I'm in the newsagent. Yeah. And for about probably a few months, I was just reading everything, just with no sort of filter. And then I stumbled on Punisher and Dark Knight Returns, and then really discovered 2000 AD, and sort of then my taste started to form. Yeah, you know, that's basically how it happened for me.
It's a really slow burn, I think, as when you do get started, because it's such a vast universe, and as you say, you just got to dip your toe and pick. Just something, you know, and the Wolverine was the one for you. And then I guess it's kind of like music, I find, in a way. You find common threads in them. Say, like Wolverine, it might have been he's one of the bad boys, you know, so that might have piqued your interest in, say, the Punisher or Judge Dredd. And
he was being heavily marketed at the time, Wolverine. And my friend who knew a lot about comics had mentioned him, and really that's even how I knew who it was. And I remember I've told this I think on the show before. I think when I was talking to probably Drew Geraci, the comic store guy was just lovely. The owner was just this really nice young guy, and I read Dark Knight Returns, and it blew my mind. And I came up to him and go, I need something like this, more like this. Yeah. And he gave me like this questionnaire, which I don't really remember, and he gave me a questionnaire of like, you know, my tastes and what I thought of things and stuff. Yeah. And it was brief. And he led me over to the Punisher, which was Mike Barron's Punisher, and he said, just start here, kid.
Wow.
And that's where it all began. Like, and he was the nicest guy, if you know what I mean. Yeah. Like he really sort of like knew that I had no idea who was who. Yeah. And that's kind of, and then as I said, like after a couple of months, because you read a lot when you're at that age. Yeah. And I had a budget. It was small, but I had a budget each week. Yeah. And I started picking up 2000 AD, and that's kind of where I really kind of formed my tastes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like he's the guy, as you mentioned as well. He's probably just as passionate, enthusiastic, and he's just sharing that passion, I reckon. And it's one of those great things, I think, especially like with comic books and I guess any pop culture or any like subculture as well. When you meet up with like-minded, interested people, it's really good. You do feed off that as well. So that's great. I mean, it sounds very similar to myself as well. Finding my first comic book store and just chatting with as a young kid as well, just chatting with them.
Yeah, and I was very shy and very introverted. And, you know, I was by myself. Like, I was at a new school. I didn't have any sort of friends or anything. I'm not. This isn't a sob story by any means. I actually kind of enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But I didn't have anyone to talk to about it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I kind of found my own way with some assistance from this guy. And then it was kind of nice. I was just in my own space. This is long before the internet.
Yeah.
None of my friends read comics.
Yeah.
You know, it was kind of a bit, later on they did, but, like, it was kind of nice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and that's why I do believe, like, they talk about gatekeepers and stuff. I'm always been a proponent of, if there is that young person who's interested, just let them enjoy themselves. Like really.
Like the kid at the swap meet. Exactly. I can see that reflected.
Exactly like that kid. Exactly like that kid at the swap meet, dude.
Yeah.
You know, really, honestly, that is very much how I was when I started as well.
Yeah, and we can all empathise with what he's going through. You know, and there's a little bit of us, you know, going, I remember that was really cool, and you want them to experience that kind of same joy and the same kind of exploration of this whole new universe. Which, you know, for that kid,
definitely,
hopefully that will kick him off, and he's got years and years ahead of him of enjoyable comic book reading. You know, it's
exactly,
it's quite amazing, and it's amazing as well. It's what I find, and you mentioned it as well with there not being the internet at the time, and you picking up Wolverine. I always found that, you know, the popularity of Wolverine quite amazing, in the sense that he didn't have the exposure, like even before the 90s X-Men cartoon, he didn't have the exposure of, say, Tim Burton's Batman or Richard Donner's Superman, yet he did garner quite a large following. And obviously,
he was pretty big. He was pretty big from memory,
especially in the 90s as well. Like, he had that big boom.
Oh, for sure.
With the Punisher and Ghost Rider. These were two. Rick, our last guest, we reviewed Ghost Rider, Punisher, Wolverine, Hearts of Darkness, which was a graphic novel.
It's awesome. We did it on the Signal of Doom not that long ago.
Oh, you did as well.
Yeah, it's good. It's good fun.
I've got to.
Yeah.
Check that up. But that's really good.
I did it with Dane Lamont from Punisher Body Count came on, and we did a sort of show together.
Yeah, I remember that one.
It was a lot of fun.
Oh, so you did it, because I hadn't read it until I spoke with Rick. So in retrospect, it's funny.
I hadn't read it either, actually. Neither I read it for the show, first time ever, and it's fun. Yeah, like, it's John Romita Jr. on art. It's good stuff.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. And you just picked up. You were telling us you just picked up a John Romita Jr. massive omnibus of Thor.
Oh yeah.
We'll get
bit of an impulse buy. Yeah.
Oh, but that's okay. But also as well, I wanted to also touch upon Dave as well, like your collecting and your other hobbies, Dungeons and Dragons. It's really funny because the other some other loonies that we have chatted on the show with as well, you know, just interested to ask them how did they get into, say Moon Knight, because obviously this is a Moon Knight podcast. A lot of them came...
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them came through via video games, which I find very interesting, you know. So, I never would have thought that before as well. But
well, I mean, you know, who knows? They might have played. I mean, I know a lot of people who like. If you remember, Marvel Ultimate Alliance was a game that was quite big.
Yeah.
Quite a few people got introduced to comics through that and stuff. Like, there's all sorts of different routes. The X-Men had a few games.
For
there's
sure.
a lot of sort of mobile games now that you see people playing to do with the characters.
Yep.
Yeah, there's so many different routes to getting into it. Like, there's about 1,000 different ways to get into comics, I find.
Yeah, and it's interesting to come across people and find out how they did. I imagine a lot of them these days, there'll be a massive slice of the population introduced through the movies, of course, and the TV. They're just going...
Oh, of course, yeah. And I'm sure Marvel and DC wish there was a lot more, you know?
But yeah, I
have my own feelings about that. I think Marvel and DC could do so much more if they were serious about wanting to increase their comic book audience. Like, I really do.
Oh, just throw...
I think that they've...
Yeah, throw us some ideas.
Well, I mean, simple stuff, and I've mentioned this on the show. I saw Jimmy Palmiotti talk about it the other day. Pop-up stores at cinemas, giving, like, you know, if you recall, just recently Jason Aaron had an Avengers 1. Why not have a digital issue or even a physical issue of Avengers 1 with every single ticket of Infinity War? Stuff like that.
Oh, I remember you and Stu talking about this as well.
That kind of stuff. I'm not saying it has to be just that, but... that kind of stuff. If they're serious about wanting to increase, also I think the pricing is just way too high.
Oh, yeah.
Already I think, like, these companies, they're backed by Disney and they're backed by Warner Brothers. So they've got deep, deep pockets.
Yep.
And if they were serious, I'm sure they could do so much more. I think it's a crime that DC don't have, like, the equivalent of Marvel Unlimited. I think Marvel Unlimited's a great service.
Yeah.
Do more to promote that, though.
That's got to come, surely.
I would be...
You reckon?
Yeah. So, stuff like that. Like, I mean, kind of more targeted promotion. There's very little. It still seems like, you know, it is a small audience, and they really haven't made serious attempts to go beyond it, and they're happy to play to a pretty small theatre of seats. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's so much more, and I'm not talking about like sort of like diversification and stuff, because of course they have to do that. They should have a diversified line. But I'm talking about promoting and marketing. That's the key areas where I think they fail miserably.
Well, I mean,
you know?
I think film and TV has been a massive leap for them. I know they're different, like, studios or departments within the company, but it's still associated and connected with comics. I think that
there's still massive synergy, and if they were serious about wanting to increase their readership, not just their viewership, they could certainly do a lot more than they do.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously their viewership's right up there, man. We're talking about readership, though.
Yeah,
two
for sure.
separate things.
Yeah, exactly.
And their readership is not increasing. Their readership is not increasing at all. And there are some really, you know, the advent of digital has been, I think, fantastic. I mean, digital is just such a great platform.
Yeah. So accessible.
But I think they could do more.
Yeah.
But I mean, as simple as you buy Avengers Infinity War, you get a digital code.
Yeah, I mean,
you get a physical copy.
Yeah,
why not?
Yeah, you know, I'm not sure about the logistics, but I think that's a great idea, and I think I'm you know, kind of like you as well, and want to share this passion with other people as well, because, you know, we know how good things are. You know, there are a lot of bad things as well, but I think the good far outweighs the bad in comic books. You get some really ripping stories.
I mean, you're talking about quality. There's always been bad comic books and good comic books. I'm not really even talking about quality. I'm talking about expanding readership. That's all I'm sort of focusing on here. Nothing to do with quality. Nothing to do with what they're selling.
Yeah.
It's their targeting and their method of getting it to people that I would be working on.
Yeah, no,
you know?
no, for sure. And speaking of reading as well, what I also wanted to let the loonies out there be aware of from Dave.
Is Marlene back yet?
No, not yet. I haven't heard her yet.
What a shame.
She might
What a shame.
She might pop up just before we go or something.
She
I
might
don't know.
pop by.
Yeah.
Oh, hopefully.
But what I was saying though, with for a lot of loonies out there who may not know, David is also an author as well. So I was going to ask you, Dave, about creating, and like, because I think that goes hand in hand. I've spoken to a lot of people who love reading comic books, and in some capacity they do love to create as well. Your wheelhouse is novels, I guess. So take us through some of the stuff that you've been doing. What kind of stuff do you do?
Well, I've written and published 3 novels so far. It's called the Asanti series, Demorn Blade of Exile, Demorn City of Innocence, and Demorn Soul Fighter is the most recent one. Demorn's the lead character. Basically, it's the story of this assassin, and she's fighting against these dark gods that are threatening to engulf reality.
Yep.
That's the basic through line, and she is the head, or she's a head lieutenant, and then becomes the head of this group of assassins called the Innocents. And it's a pretty cool story. She has a girlfriend who died, and she's trying to resurrect her, and she can go between the world we know, Ray, and a world called Firethorn, which is like a separate parallel dimension. Yeah. And she can bounce between the two, and she has a few different powers, but one of her key powers is she has this sword that's inside her chest that comes out. That's the Blade of Exile.
Right.
And also things like her in later books, she has stuff like she has a steel left hand that her hand can turn into steel. She has powers of this goddess kind of thing.
Oh wow.
But like, you know, it's been a lot of fun to do them. I've always been a writer.
Yeah.
So I was always writing like a lot, like all through my 20s, and then I got to a certain age and I started to really kind of like think about what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I came up with the idea of the Innocents and the idea of Demorn. And I've written 3 books. Now, the first 2 are sort of one big book, Demorn Blade of Exile and Demorn City of Innocence. And then The third one, Demorn Soulfighter, is a standalone and can be read as a standalone. They're all available on Amazon.
Yeah.
And I'd encourage anyone who just wants to jump in to pick up Demorn Soulfighter. I think right now it's $2 on Kindle on Amazon, and it's if you've got Kindle Unlimited, you can read it for free.
Yeah, wow.
Check it out. I share an editor with Chuck Dixon. I pitched some ideas to Chuck, and he referred me onto his editor, who was very helpful and cleaned up a lot of the, he helped a lot. A good editor, I found, is just such an invaluable asset. So we're 3 books deep, and I'm currently in the early stages of writing another one, which is going to be kind of a spin-off series with Demorn as well.
Yeah.
That I'm working on now, and that'll be coming out. I mean, it could be end of this year, early next year. Just depends on how I go and the editing process.
Yeah.
But we're 3 books in, and a really very enjoyable process.
When did you?
And it's great they're out now. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. When did you first start? Like, when was the first one published?
First one was probably published in 2015, I think.
Yeah. Right.
And the second one was because the first 2 are one massive book, basically. So we edited it. I think the first one came out in 2015. Second one in 2016, like a few months after, and then in 2017, Soulfighter came out.
Yeah, right.
So
awesome.
Yeah, so we're 3 books in.
Always fascinates me, like people that write books as well, because to me, it's a massive universe that you've got to create in your head, and you've got to keep that kind of up for foreseeable length. We're talking.
It's a lot of fun though, man. Like, to be honest, like it's also a lot of fun. Like, it's hard work. Yeah. Don't get me wrong, but once you've done it, like I really enjoyed writing the third one. Writing my first book, I'd written the first book about 5 times, to be honest.
Wow.
Like I'd done a lot of writing, man. Like, it wasn't like it was my first rodeo. You know what I mean? I'd written hundreds of thousands of words.
Jeez.
But it just so happened I got a through line with Demorn, and I got this image of her. It's a pretty full on world. Like I describe it as the third book is kind of more action sci-fi, but the first 2 are pretty heavy fantasy as well. And if you like your sword and sorcery, your Conans and stuff, there's a touch of that.
Yeah.
There's a touch of like crazy sort of Grant Morrison-esque kind of style as well. That like a big psychodrama behind it all.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff Lovecraftian overtones. I pack a lot of stuff into the 3 novels. I really try to have a lot of fun with it. And let it brim with ideas, and action. And that's kind of what they're all about.
Yeah. And the beauty, I guess, of novels. And having such a vast canvas like that is that there's so much detail put in it that, look, hey, I think you've mentioned to me before as well the potential of converting to a graphic novel, or even picking up, I think also opportunities to pick up as a TV show or movie or whatever. So a novel is quite versatile in that sense, and it gives you a great springboard. And
that's kind of what I wanted to do, Ray. Like, when I started writing them, years ago.
Yeah.
Okay. When I started writing the first book, Blade of Exile, I was writing it from memory as a comic. Okay, and I kind of had an artist that I'd done a little bit of work on, not stuff that got published, but we'd done like a couple of issues of this and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I was writing it in comic book format, and I had a holiday with my girlfriend. So I'd been writing for let's say 2 months.
Yeah.
And then I suddenly realised while I was on holiday, this could be so much better as a novel. I could give it some deeper layers, but I could also pitch it to make it whatever I wanted to be. So I could easily convert them to graphic novel format, that kind of thing. And that's just it was kind of an epiphany I had, and it really freed me up as well.
It was a massive undertaking, though.
And kind of like
to actually say to yourself, I'm going to turn it into a novel. That's a big thing.
Well, it was early days, man. It was early days. And as I said, I'd done a lot of writing before, I'd been writing novels, since I was like 20, basically. So that wasn't a problem, I had say probably 60 pages.
Okay.
Enough for about two comics, and I converted that. That wasn't hard. And I have copious notes. I'm a big believer in doing notes on my phone, so I have quite detailed notes and scene ideas that I want.
Yeah.
It's really taking me back to the first 2 books. They were a kind of labour of love, really. They took a lot out of me. I was absorbing a lot of material at the time, like other fictional material, and also kind of cruising on my imagination, really kind of going deep inside.
Yeah.
But then when I got to the third book, I felt like way more experienced.
Yeah,
and I felt like the first two had kind of almost been, not a practice run maybe, but like I just felt a lot more confident.
Yeah, you'd learned a lot.
And the third one was so much easier and more fun to write, and most people say it's the best one. Like, I mean, it's the best reviewed.
Okay.
It's the best selling, and I wrote it as a standalone. So I always really encourage people, if they want to check out my writing, check out Demorn Soulfighter, and enjoy.
Yeah, we'll definitely put this in the show notes as well. So any loony listeners out there who are keen, and I know there are a fair few of them that are really into like fantasy novels as well. So for sure, we'll post that up there, and we'll give you the right links to get those books. Yeah, that's really cool, Dave. That's
thank you, Ray. I'm glad I came over.
Yeah, not so spooky in this mansion after all. Yeah, so. No, that's fantastic. I'm going to throw it out to you now, Dave. I don't know if you've been asked this before as well, but if you had thoughts about, say, turning it into a graphic novel, who would your wish list be? Well, what would your wish list be for, say, for the artist? Who would you like to see drawing it?
Oh, sorry. Okay, like to draw it.
Yeah. If you could get anyone.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, look, just over the last day or so, as we've been preparing for the best of, one of the comics we're going to discuss. Frank Quitely did some artwork. I love Frank Quitely's art, man. If you're talking about, I could pick anybody at all. I mean, so if Frank Quitely, I'd love to see Frank Quitely do some stuff with it for sure. Someone like that. But I'm pretty flexible, dude.
Okay, so was he in the Invisibles? No.
Yes, he did Frank Quitely did the Invisibles artwork, and he also did things like Superman, All-Star Superman, lots of things he's done. Batman.
Well, it's the first one I've seen. These are one of the books that Loonies is one of the books that Dave has picked. We'll get to soon, but the art's really distinct, I find, and it was a really nice stylized look.
Yeah, and there's a lot of artists, like, I'm picking him at random, Ray. There's a lot of artists that I find such a pleasure.
Rob Liefeld?
Like Doug Mankey.
Doug Mankey, okay.
Well, I mean, he has his fans, and you can't deny the guy's success. I'm always pleased to see how happy he is, you know?
Yeah.
But like someone like Doug Mankey, that kind of style art, I love. There's a lot of different art styles that I actually really like.
Yeah.
And I could go a lot of different ways with what kind of art I would like in a comic book, because I think that's one of the joys of comic book reading. The different variations. I don't love all art that comics have, but there's so many different ways you can go with it that I think is really cool.
Yeah.
And it really adds to the story.
Oh.
And the sort of like interpretation.
Absolutely, and I think the right artist with the right sort of story, when they go really well together. Again, there's one of the books that we'll be reviewing coming up soon, which I found which was the Sandman book. I found the art and the type of story that Gaiman wanted to tell was really well suited. So
very much agreed.
Yeah. Okay, well, before we get into that as well, just one final, actually, big question I wanted to ask you, David, as well, and I'm sure listeners are no strangers to your show.
My thoughts on the afterlife?
No. Your thoughts on the Signal of Doom. So Dave Finn and Main Man Stu, who we've mentioned before, podcasters are doing.
Are you asking my thoughts on the Signal of Doom? I love the Signal of Doom. It should be compulsory in schools.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Your thoughts as well, but more so, just the origin of it. How did it come about? Tell the loony listeners how you know Stu. What's the genesis?
Well, Signal of Doom is. Just to let everyone know, if they haven't heard already, and I'd be surprised if they haven't, but Signal of Doom is a weekly show podcast that I do with my close friend and co-host Stu. I think we're up to, oh my god, I'm not sure, I think it's episode 64, I think is the next one. Plus a few specials I've done as well, interviews, and basically it's a comic book movies podcast. We focus a lot on, different, basically pop culture news we do, and then we do comic book news as well. Any scandals that happen through the week, we're always keen for a scandal. Yeah, sometimes scandals that I've generated, unfortunately. Random rants, generally from me, and then we do weekly comics. We select. DC are kind enough to give us their digital comics each week as our image, and we go through a selection of weekly comics. Generally, 4 or 5 weekly comics coming out. We discuss them and review them, and then we do a trade of the week. Yep. So, for example, this week coming up, it's Thor by Dan Jurgens and John Romita Jr. Volume 1. We're doing.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and we discuss it, and in between that we banter. And Stu and I are old friends. We both played a lot of tennis. Together.
The banter's really good. It's one of the I think one of the highlights of the podcast as well. Also, the bone of contention, I think, between who picks the next trade of the week. I know you both.
Oh yeah, it's
I would say
long-standing.
You have polarizing tastes in comics. I know.
Oh well, it's actually pretty easy. Really, we have like a big Google document that has all these books on there, and generally, honestly, there's very little arguing that goes on. It's more just a case of placing books so that they match up with movie dates, and then we sort of just do one off, one on with each other. Like there's very little. We always like to make it sound a bit more exciting because occasionally there is, like, Stu really enjoys his cosmic Marvel stuff, which personally, before this podcast started, I wouldn't have gotten out of bed to read any cosmic Marvel. Like, frankly, I'm a Punisher guy. You know what I'm saying? And Stu's got some.
Yeah, you enjoyed the Nova series though, which was.
Yeah, I did. Of course, I did. I know Stu. Well, Stu got a few wins. In his 64 episodes, he's had a few wins. But it's always good when we pick one. The thing that happens that's always really funny is when someone picks a book.
Yeah.
Because generally we're picking books we haven't read, and then it just bombs. You know what I mean? And then it's just it's on your resume forever as a black mark.
Yeah, you have to actually have to go through the damn book as well. You have to relive it.
There's been a couple of books where we're just like, oh my god, will this ever end? But no, we've found our groove. We've been going for over a year now. When we started, we were doing like phone book sized editions, in a week, which is hard.
I know that
because we're both obviously working.
I remember that, and I could not believe you guys were trying to review 450, 500 page books in a week. I was going, you guys are going to kill yourselves.
I'm generally to blame there. I'm generally the one to blame because my eyes are a bit bigger than my tummy, and I get a bit excited, and I'm always generally trying to push these like phone book size Punisher, books through, just trying to kind of get them through Parliament before Stu realises what's up. No, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, can you give a hint as to maybe trades coming up that you have you projected ahead?
Yeah, we've got a long list of stuff coming up. We're going to be doing. Some of the books we're discussing tonight, there's going to be some Sandman coming up. Awesome. There's going to be Invisibles.
Yeah.
I've actually got a Google document here.
I just thought it'd be great to give the loonies
stuff like, for example, we're going to do Kree Skull War is coming up. Good. We're going to do Dark Phoenix Saga. Yeah. We're constantly searching for a good Star Wars comic, and so far we've gone 2 out of 2 kind of fairly forgettable ones.
Oh well, maybe
I've got a Punisher.
Yeah, I was just about to say maybe one of the loonies can drop a line and suggest if any of the loonies love a Star Wars comic or a trade, maybe hit us up and maybe we can suggest that.
Yeah, let us know. I did this call out on the show last week. So far we've done Star Wars The Knights of the Old Republic, which was just a bomb. And then last week we did Star Wars Shadows of the Empire, which was okay, Ray, but it was nothing fantastic.
Okay.
But we've got stuff coming up like Moonshine. I'm going to do some 100 Bullets.
Ooh.
We're always up for Batman. We've been doing Batman Nightfall. We've had Chuck Dixon on the show twice.
Yeah.
And he's going to come back on very shortly. I've got a few people coming on shortly. I've got guys like Frank Terry and Jimmy Palmiotti are coming on the show shortly.
Oh wow!
I'm actually lining up Frank Terry for an appearance very shortly.
Wow.
So we've got people coming up. We've got all sorts of stuff coming up. And we're going to do some Paper Girls. As I said, we're doing Thor. Dave's going to take a trip back in the time machine. We're going to do Batman and the Outsiders, where I'm going to read the first comic that I ever bought. That's just kind of a bit of a nostalgic choice by me. But some might say a selfish pick, but I don't care. And Stu, and we're going to do some Hellblazer. One thing we've always
Awesome.
wanted to do is Hellblazer, but as I said, Stu's really keen to do Invisibles and Sandman, and I'm super keen. Because I haven't read them recently until we're going to do them for this show, and it's kind of reawakened my love for that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, great.
that'll be coming up soon too. So there's a long list. You know what comics are like, Ray. There's so many, and that's one of the beauties of doing a weekly show. We can kind of just keep cycling through them.
Yes, so Loonies, if any of the Loonies out there are keen on any of the titles that Dave just mentioned, it's worth hitting up the Signal of Doom and checking out their reviews, not only of the trades, but of course of the weekly comics and of the news and reviews of all things on the TV and in the movies as well. So,
It really should be compulsory listening for the youth of today, I feel.
in the syllabus,
You know?
should be in the syllabus, I think.
Should be in the syllabus, yes.
All right, well, before we head out, Dave, as well, and I know you're itching to meet Marlene, but
I am. I hope she's in a bikini.
she might be in her squeaky velvet. I don't know, but yeah. Before we go into that, I want to start talking about now your Isla Ra comics, which, AKA,
Yes.
are your Desert Island comics. So the comics that you
Yes.
would take with you, 4 of them only, to a desert
Yeah.
island, and that would sustain you for your term there. Happily reading and rereading them. So you gave us actually a few honourable mentions before we get to the big 2. And let's start off with, I mean, we'll go through these just, quite, quite broadly. But your first one was the Sandman. I'm going to start with the Sandman, number 8, was it? The first...
honourable mention, yeah.
Honourable mention, yeah.
yes.
Yep, there's honourable mention with
the
the...
Sandman issue 8 by Neil Gaiman. It's the first appearance of Death.
Yep.
His sister, Dream Sister, in the Sandman comic.
Yep.
And I love this comic so much, this issue, because everyone had told me, Ray.
Yeah.
Everyone, it seemed like, in comics had told me to read Sandman.
Right, yeah.
And so I sat down... And I like Neil Gaiman. I'd already read a couple of his books. I was already a Neil Gaiman fan. I sat down and started reading Sandman. And the start of Sandman, it's good, but it's not great.
Yeah.
Like he's finding his feet as a writer. Yeah. And then suddenly you hit issue 8, and the whole book and everything about it raises like 5 notches, and it's just so good. And that's where I went, you know what? This isn't just a good comic, this is a great comic. And I was a Sandman fan from then on. And I think this is just such a great issue. It's basically the appearance of his sister Death, who's one of the great supporting characters in this Sandman series. And I just loved it. And the only reason it doesn't... I had a rule, Ray, when it came to picking the Desert Island comics. Because Stu was saying, I guess it's going to be 4 Punisher comics and all this kind of stuff. And 4 or 3 Punisher, 1 Batman, or something like that is what he was saying.
Yeah.
But I said each character only gets kind of 1 comic. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And so I had to choose between my 2 favourite Sandman issues, and this narrowly misses out. But I do want to give a special respect to Sandman issue 8. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, look, we won't go into it in detail like the others, but it is. I was fortunate enough, exactly like you, Dave. It just sounds so familiar. Everyone kept on telling me, Sandman. Earlier this year, I went to the library, which had the first trade of Sandman. So I think it was was issues 1 to 8. So this was the last one.
Sure.
And,
yes, it is.
Yeah.
It is. I think this is the last one in the first trade.
Yeah, and exactly like you, I found it at first. I was reading it, going, what is really good? I mean, I enjoyed Sam Keith's art at the beginning. But it was a little slow for me, and I was like, oh, I don't really see it. But it was only the last few issues. Like it was issue 8 definitely, and I think it might have been 1 or 2 before it as well. Where for me it was starting,
definitely,
it was starting to come together, and I was like, oh, hang on. And this 8, I mean, it was so good how they ended the trade on 8, because this is quite a punchy issue. And
it shows you how fast Neil Gaiman evolved, though, because he was a fresh comic book writer. So, I mean, his writing was evolving that fast. That's how talented the guy was. He was finding his feet, and then suddenly he comes out with this issue by issue 8.
Yeah.
and it's an all-time classic.
It is a very cool.
People could write their whole careers and not get close to this.
Yeah, and look, we're not going to go into detail, but I like the whole motif with actually that little girl with the ball, obviously talking about death as well, and she, she's playing with the ball, and it keeps on coming in and out of the story between Morpheus and Death talking. The art is really, really cool as well. It's very emo, very goth. Because this was...
But that's the character of Death.
Yeah, that
is Death.
Yeah.
She was like the hipster goth chick of the 90s, basically,
Exactly, and we'll see it later on.
That was kind of a character.
Yeah, and we'll see it later on with your other pick, with I guess the trends throughout the ages of Morpheus. You see him as well, the way he appears, which is really cool. But yeah, this was a really good book, and what I thought, Dave, as well now is, as opposed to what I've been doing previously. I think because these are your Desert Island books, so there's no real need for me to market, because they are your books, and they're your favourites. So look, don't get me wrong, I do love this issue as well. But what would you give this out of 5 crescent darts? What would you give this issue? And just yourself, not myself.
I'd give it 5 for sure.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well,
right.
the issue. Yeah, but. But I wouldn't have brought it to I wouldn't have brought it to the table if it wasn't close to a 5. For me.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
No, I love this issue.
Good.
I love Death. To be honest, Ray, I absolutely love the character of Death so much so that she's a 5 basically straight away out of 5.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, I mean, it has piqued my interest. Sorry, has piqued my interest because I actually haven't picked up the other trades, and I did read issue 13.
Issue 13 is fantastic. Sandman only gets better.
Yeah.
Sandman, look, it has some down issues here and there in its 75 issue run or whatever. There's a couple of issues that are a bit, I don't know, just not all there. But overall, this series gets so much deeper and cooler the more you get into it. I've only read it through pretty much twice, almost 1.5 times. And I'm due for another read-through, which we're going to do on the Signal of Doom. Sandman is a comic that just gets better and better and better, and Neil Gaiman totally sticks the landing. So, yeah, it's a highly recommended. And I mean, I'm the millions before me have recommended it, so I'm not saying anything revolutionary, but, I agree.
No, for sure. No, it's always good to hear, and, I think that one of the other takeaways is that I read, because at the beginning you see him interacting with the rest of the DC universe, and I think they dropped that, which was a good thing.
Oh yeah,
I don't know if any more characters come out later, but
hardly at all. There's one or two allusions throughout the whole run from my memory, and I'm not a Sandman expert of every issue, but pretty much he's in his own pocket. Do you know what I mean? There's an early John Constantine appearance. There's an echo towards the end without spoiling anything, but really it's its own thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, cool, great. So Sandman number 8 was one of Dave's
honourable mentions.
5 out of 5. 5
For
out
sure.
of 5 crescent darts. If we go on to another one of your honourable mentions, let me just pick here which one to go through next.
I've got one in my mind, if you want me to say. I've got one in my head. I actually feel guilty for not... I honestly feel bad for... And it was single issues. It was your top 4 single issues, which made it tough because I'm more of a trade reader and always have, and I always have been, for many years, for the last 20 years. But one of my all-time favourite trades is Half a Life in Gotham Central, which is Renee Montoya's basically story.
This is the Renee Montoya.
Renee Montoya is one of my all-time favourite characters in comics, and I feel really bad that I'm not including an issue, but I really find it hard to single an issue out of that whole run. I love Gotham Central, but I do want to say, as an honourable mention, the whole arc of Half a Life, which Greg Rucka did when he and Brubaker did Gotham Central. It's just so good, and I would honestly recommend if anyone hasn't read it, and likes Greg Rucka and kind of the kind of stuff he does. It's such a good storyline inside Gotham Central. I think it goes for 5 or 6 issues. It's just so good, and I feel bad for not actually including it here, but oh well,
Is it a 90s or is it late 80s or something?
Well,
do you know the era?
Yeah, they did it in the early 2000s when Greg Rucka and Ed Brubaker were working together at DC. So it would have come out in the... I'm not sure exactly what year, but like the early 2000s, probably around 2003-ish or something like that. It was towards the end of Rucka at DC. And Ed Brubaker there. So it was around 2003 to 2004. It was somewhere around there.
Okay, so we got the early 2000s. I'm looking here, Sandman 8, got another honourable mention, 1997. So we got towards the end of the 90s.
Oh, Sandman was more like late 80s, man. Sandman finished in about 96 or 97, but Sandman 8 would have been like late 80s, like 89-ish, somewhere around there.
Yeah, you're right, 89, August 89, sorry.
I didn't read it then, but that's when it roughly would have been.
Yeah. No, spot on. Okay, so you squeeze another one in there. That's all right. So Half-Life, which is good.
Oh, it's good story.
You also have... I'm going to have to lean on you for this one, Dave, because I haven't got it. I think you mentioned there was only a hard copy. A.B.C. Warriors?
Yeah, this is...
Take us through that one.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to bring you back into the mind of like a 13, 14-year-old Davey. Okay, I'm at a new school. I'm reading 2000 AD, and it's basically my life. Like Judge Dredd for me was just everything. Okay, like at that age, and you know, zero friends, zero people who read comics. It was just Dave in 2000 AD, and to be honest, I was fine. You know what I mean? A.B.C. Warriors are this cool... It was in the first issue of 2000 AD I ever bought, actually. This cool band of kind of robot... Well, they are robots. Kind of war robots, I guess you could say. Now, Simon Bisley, you might know him, was the artist. He went on to do Lobo and stuff. Yeah, and this was kind of his... This was kind of his... may have been his first work at 2000 AD. And anyway, they're all different robots, and they all have different personalities, but there was one of the robots, and his name was Joe Pineapples, and he was an assassin, and he was as cool as they come. None of them were heavy on emotions, and he had almost no emotions. He was just a hit droid, basically. And he had a massive leather jacket, had awesome art by Simon Bisley, and wore sunglasses. And this issue is... Basically, 2000 AD was, if people don't know, is kind of an anthology comic where stories generally run from, you know, at least back in those days, they ran about 7 or 8 pages. And it would be in parts. So this was in a story called The Black Hole Saga, which ran for, like, say... 20 parts, but each part, unlike a DC or Marvel comic, which is generally like 20 to 22 pages, these were only 8 pages. So it might go for 20 parts, but it was only 8 pages per part. And in this Black Hole Saga story, this particular one is just Joe Pineapples going off on a mission of his own to kill this person, and it's kind of his interior monologue combined with Simon Bisley's beautiful art. And it has this really great... his art's beautiful. It's fantastic, and it's black and white, back in those days. 2000 AD, back in those days, was primarily a fully black and white comic. And it then became full colour, but this was just the last days of it being black and white. And Joe Pineapples was just the coolest guy. He went out, and I remember at the start of it, he goes, "It's nice to get away from all the others with all their petty arguments. I find it all just so uncool." And this picture of Joe Pineapples from the back, and then he goes on the mission... And he comes back and he keeps the hearts of the people he kills in this chest locker. He puts them in there because he sort of wants to feel something. And Hammerstein, who's the lead guy, when he comes back, goes... and Joe Pineapples puts music on while he's playing. So all through the mission, the Doors are playing, like Light My Fire and, you know, People Are Strange and all that kind of thing. And he comes back and Hammerstein, the lead droid's going, "Oh, Joe, you know, it's glad to see that you want to feel something." And Joe's just like... "Look, I just want it to be fun again. These days," and it's a picture of him shooting someone, goes, "It's just another hit." And I always just loved... It's such a beautiful little snapshot. I read it so many times in my teenage years. Like, I just love the coolness and the aloofness of the character, and just and the gorgeous art. The art just sells it. Like, Simon Bisley, I know he has his own style, and like he became like big on Lobo, and it's fun. But ultimately, you know, he has that style. He did some Turtle stuff, but I've always got a soft spot for his art. He's so cartoonish, but I think it was kind of like... It's funny, like, he peaked really early as an artist. Like, he's just an interesting kind of... He seemed to come with so much talent to the table straight away, you know?
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. I think I know what you mean. Like, he he was fully developed like quite early on.
Yeah, and
right?
and it had a real macabre sense of humour. Like 2000 AD has very much a satirical edge back in those days. These gorgeous pictures of these robots that look so cool, and then he's a big fan of doing like little graffiti tags and stuff. There was a lot there for readers to pick up on. You know, a lot of little jokes and stuff. Was one of the things I really
I
liked.
see a lot of common threads as well. Was this was before your discovery of the Punisher, right?
No, it wasn't. It was kind of parallel. Parallel to is how I would describe it.
Because I see a lot of. Yeah, I see a lot of like similar traits. Like there is, especially in the '90s Punisher, there is an aloofness to him.
Oh, for sure. Oh, there's definitely
Yeah.
Joe was really funny because he almost has no personality other than he's really cool. And there's this really funny moment in the comic, and I think I mentioned to you offline, Ray, where they're getting towards the end of the adventure, and they've sort of got to beat like this big monster that's literally destroying reality. And Hammerstein, the lead droid, he's like the patriotic one, goes, "Any ideas, Joe?" And Joe, any ideas, Joe? And Joe just sneers, which is all Joe ever does. And Hammerstein goes, "Well, Siri's not going to save the world."
Oh, that's right, yeah.
But that's the ultimate.
That's right.
Joe Pineapples is just not the guy to go to for the big answers. He just wants to do the hit and get out of town. You know what I mean?
I think he's got one of the best names.
It's a funny name. It's so random, dude. It's so random. And what I found out later was, the ABC Warriors kind of went through, say 10 years of 2000 AD, and they developed the characters a lot in terms of their look. Like, they really modernised the look. And that was kind of the thing with Joe. He says when you've rebuilt yourself 8 times over, you're just looking for some sort of variety because he's just that jaded. And, I'm a 13-year-old identifying with this jaded killer droid just completely.
Yeah. Oh, look, angsty teenager.
Yeah, definitely.
You were heading into your teens, rife for this sort of stuff. So,
definitely.
Fantastic. And that leads into... Oh, actually, before I say that, so that issue or series is pretty hard to come by, right? It's not on digital.
Oh, no, it isn't that. It isn't that hard. You can pick it up on... you can get it... they put all the ABC Warriors collection together on Amazon. They're called the Mech Files, and it's in Mech Files Volume 1, which covers the first, 10 years of the ABC Warriors, and so it's in that. It's the last story in that one. And to be honest, out of all the ABC Warrior stories I ever read, Black Hole Saga is definitely the best one by a long way. It's a fantastic amalgamation of Pat Mills, who was the writer. He was the first editor of 2000 AD. Yeah. And Simon Bisley. It sort of doesn't get better. Sort of after that, everything's kind of like a bit of a pastiche. It's almost like they try to copy it, if you know what I mean. But it was just perfect.
Oh, well,
basically.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, I'll try to be sure to put the correct the Black Hole Saga. I'll try to put that in the show notes as well, just so the loonies are directed to the the exact collection where this issue is that we're talking about.
I can send you the link for the Mech Files. It's called Mech Files Volume 1.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, yeah, for sure. I'll chuck that in the show notes.
Sure.
And also, finally, we're leading up... Well, I wanted to lead up to one of Dave's... I'm assuming one of your favourite characters. One of your honourable mentions here was for the Punisher War Journal, number 40.
I want to say,
Brilliant,
I could have picked
cover.
so many Punisher stories. And there's about 5 Punisher stories, all one-shots, all written by either Mike Barron or Chuck Dixon, that could have fit this slot, and it just so happens I picked... It was like a flip of a coin and good money came up.
I know you're a big Punisher fan, so you might get this. There's one one really memorable Punisher issue for me in the 90s. Mm-hmm. I used to love Ron Wagner. You remember him as an artist? He was fantastic art. Yeah. And there was one issue, I'm not sure if it was Punisher War Journal or just a Punisher, but he was stuck in the snow, and it was a one-shot. He was stuck in the snow.
That's a fantastic... that actually almost made my list. It's a Chuck Dixon story. Yeah. It's a Chuck Dixon story.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Where I think it's called Sleigh Ride or something like that, and where he's on the bus, and the bus goes into the snow.
I think so. It's in the snow, yeah.
There's a serial killer on the bus. Yeah, it's a great story. Yeah. It's another great one-shot.
It is.
Look, Chuck Dixon did some awesome Punisher, and he wrote some of the best one-shots for the character they've ever had. That's a great story as well. I think it's called Sleigh Ride, if I can remember correctly.
Okay.
Yeah.
SLAY, I'm assuming.
Yeah, sleigh is in Christmas sleigh.
Yeah. Oh no, I thought as in a double entendre. Like
Oh,
as in
actually,
slay.
you're right. No, you're
SLA.
no, you're right. Actually, yeah. I'm looking at it now. It's the one you're talking about is Punisher War Journal 39. So it's the issue before this one, which is Punisher War Journal issue 40. So that's how close it is. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Well, yeah, I do love the Punisher one-shots. They were really good. And it's really cool to hear that Chuck Dixon did really good ones as well. This one that you've chosen was a really fun...
I love it.
A really fun ride. Can you just quickly take us through this story?
I'll take you through the story. Now, I've read this story probably about 100 times over the course of my life. I love it. So basically, Punisher starts out... he's by himself, and he's putting down these hoodlums who've been robbing like liquor stores and stuff, and they've killed people along the way. And Punisher's track them down, and so it starts out with him killing them while they're in a car, and he takes a bullet, and they destroy, or at least they damage his car. So then he goes into town, and at the same time that he's doing this, these people are doing like an armoured truck heist. So I don't know what you call it, like armoured truck. They're heisting one of those trucks, and they kill the guards, and then there's this woman there, and she then betrays the leader of the robbers, who's a guy, I think his name is Big. He's a psycho, but she's a cold unit, and she blows him away, and she's running down the road with her little offsider, and then she decides let's make things even simpler. Let's divide the cash by one, and so she blows away him, and then the car crashes. And so she takes all the money and she goes into town, and Frank's in town, recovering from his wounds. And you're treated to some of the best scenes with Frank alone in the hotel room, where because he's taken a bullet and he's just talking to himself like in his head, and he's saying stuff like, "That's not going to make up for what happened to those kids. It's not going to even the score. I know, because I can never even the score for my family's death. There's a reason I was left alive when they died. If I didn't believe that, I'd lose my mind. Lose my mind. That's a good one." And Frank's just got a gun. He's just... I love it. I love the way Chuck does Frank, where he's like... He's lucid, and he's kind of a bit sarcastic, but he's just this... He's like a dark soul. You know what I mean?
Very dark soul. He is... You cannot brood any more than Frank, really.
He's just... And his commentary is just super, dark all the time. Anyway, so this chick rolls into the diner, and she's trying to get on Frank's good side by sort of being a bit kitsy pie around him. He's not really buying it. He's seeing his car's in the shop, but she's got all this cash, and so he Frank always has a soft spot for women, and he lets her drive along with him. And at the same time, the guy that she killed didn't actually die, and so he's trying to track down this woman. Yep. And so Frank's driving along, and then out of nowhere pops up this other car with this... I love this bit. This guy pops up with this machine gun, and Frank's like, "Is that your boyfriend?" Because she spun this story about her boyfriend left her. And then he's like, "No way of knowing who these guys are or how they found me. I have armies of scum that want me dead." Frank's just someone's after him.
But I love it because it's totally he's misconstrued the whole thing. He believes it's him that they're after, and he wants to protect her, which is so warped because we know that she is a cold-hearted killer.
I spoke to Chuck Dixon about this issue on the show, and I sort of mentioned it, and he said it's because basically to Frank, every woman is his wife who he couldn't save. That's why his weak spot is women. It's not that he desires them, he wants to protect them because he couldn't protect his wife. Which, I mean, it kind of makes sense. That's kind of the character. I mean, people might say that sounds corny. That's the character, man. This is the way Frank lives his life,
Totally is the character, but unfortunately he's protecting the wrong sort of woman here.
No, this woman is a cold-eyed killer. And anyway, so basically what happens then is, the cars sort of crash into each other. There's a whole lot of stuff going on. Frank, sort of manages not quite to get wiped out by a Mack truck. And they crash. And he's kind of wounded. And he gets up, and the girl's got up before him, and she's gathering the money. And then the guy comes, who she didn't kill, and he's like, "Earlene, you've been a bad girl." And Frank's still thinking that she's standing in the line of fire, helpless. He still sees her as totally innocent. Until the woman just drops the guy with this point blank isosceles stance, Frank calls it, and then Frank's
To the
like
face.
realizes
Yeah,
the penny
yeah.
finally drops, and he's like, "Leave the
Yeah.
money and you can walk away." And she's like, "You saved my life. I owe you, whoever you are." And he's like, "Leave the money and walk away."
Yeah.
And she's like, "You
Almost
want the
like a
cash?"
Western.
Yeah. Oh, very much like a Western. "You want the cash?
Yeah.
You can have it. You can have a whole lot more than that." And he's like, she's like, "You hear what I'm saying?" And Frank's like, actually got sweat come out. He's like, "I hear. I got an idea that giving that away doesn't mean that much to you." The eyes flash just enough, and then Frank blows her away. And then I love this bit where he says, "Blindsided again. I thought she was Miss America and Snow White rolled into one. Right until she dropped into that isosceles stance and pegged that big guy 3 in the head."
3 in the head, yeah.
And then Frank sort of wanders back, with the cash.
It is so, I don't know how do you say it, it's not just over the top, but it just, like, he drops her with an Uzi as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Well,
he like, really makes sure.
There's
and it was,
Frank's pretty black and white.
Yeah, very black and white. And in the 90s, he was the most black and the most white that you could get. Very, very well, and a lot of fun written by Chuck Dixon.
Yeah,
as well.
and the
He
art's
really had
great
a
too.
handle.
The art really sells
Art's
it as
good.
Well. Yeah. It's
I actually...
one of my favourite comics of all time, for sure.
Yeah, I actually had to double take and have a look who the artist was, because I was quite impressed with it. I almost got a bit of a... almost a bit of a, the 90s big, like the Jim Lee or a Mark Silvestri to him.
Stephen Butler, not someone I'm personally familiar with, but...
No.
And Kim DeMulder on art. Now, Chuck Dixon did a lot of work with Gary Kasprowitz, is how I think you say his name. He worked a lot with him on Conan, and in fact, he does the next issue of Punisher War Journal called Armageddon Express, which is also very good. And the art's not dissimilar to that style either that Gary Kasprowitz had as well, who was a collaborator with a lot of Chuck stuff around that time period. They did a long run on Conan together. Yeah, no, I mean... I think Chuck has said he had the fortune to work with a lot of really gifted artists, and certainly this is no exception.
Yeah, you did have there were a lot of good artists. I mean, despite what some people might say in the 90s, I do like some of the art there. Of course,
dude, people who think the 90s was full of all bad comics are basically just foolish and know nothing. It's ignorance talking. Yes, of course, there were terrible comics in the 80s, and there are terrible comics now.
Of course,
there are terrible comics and good comics in every single generation and decade.
And it's unfair to remember a decade for, a bad, the bad stuff.
Dude, I've read bad comics that were written in 2018 this week, and I've read good comics in 2018 this week.
Absolutely. There's there are a lot of comics that are a bit mediocre, I think. But
definitely.
Having said that as well, there are a lot of really good ones as well. I mean, what I find when we live in the now, a lot of people kind of focus on that was really crap, that was shit. There is good stuff out there as well. So
there's plenty of good. There's plenty of good stuff being produced now as well. Of course, my point is that there's no period ever in comics that has been either all good or all bad. It's always been a mixture. That's the industry.
Exactly, and it's what you remember it most from. Whether exactly. Great. So these were, and how much would you give this?
Oh, this is 5 out of 5, my friend. This is 5 out of 5 all the way. I don't bring stuff to the table that's not a quality.
So are we doing 5 out of 5 for all of them?
You haven't read this issue.
Yeah.
All the ones that I brought to the table are
5 out of 5s. Okay. I've got to mention also as well, because there was a run of Punisher War Journal covers, which were really beautiful, like this one. They were airbrushed or something almost. Let me see if I can find the. It doesn't even have it in the
This does have a very
credits.
cool cover. This has actually a very beautiful cover. I agree on this issue of Punisher War Journal. I picked up Ray. I picked up a couple of years ago now the entire run of Punisher War Journal, the original Punisher, and Punisher War Zone. Off eBay for not even that much money. And it's out of the single comics I have, they're the only single comics I still have, and they're up in my shelf. And I will never give those away because they're just great. I love sometimes just bring the box down and I start reading them, and Michelle's like, will he ever come out? This Punisher shell.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. All right, well, Loonies, there you go. The honourable mentions from Dave Finn. We aren't done yet. We actually have his big 2 to come. So, Dave, I know that you've got itchy feet, this dank, musty mansion. Why don't you come with me down the hall here?
Sure.
And, yep, as we walk down, I want to turn left into, this room here. This, yep, let's open that door. Okay, I wanted to bring you into this room, Dave. This, right before us, we have the statue of Khonshu. Can you,
Oh.
Yeah, pretty cool, eh? Yeah, and what I thought...
Pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
Does he need a blood offering or something? Is that what he takes?
Well, funny you should mention that. We're going to ask our good mate K-Man, Khonshu, if he can teleport us to another destination for your final 2 books. So, Khonshu, are you there?
Who disturbs the great Khonshu?
Hello, hi. This here is Dave. Bow your head, Dave. Bow your head.
Hello, Khonshu.
Hey.
Yes, hi, mighty Khonshu. We are here.
Yeah.
Dave assures us that he will give you your pound of flesh and your bucket of blood that you want. He is a Punisher fan, so yeah. If you could just happily just teleport us away to another destination, and we'll be out of your hair. Thanks.
I will bring you to the place that you most desire. So be it. Be on your way.
Thanks, Khonshu.
Here we go.
Just don't mind the vertigo.
Hi, this is Dave.
And I'm Stu, and we're from the Signal of Doom.
We're proud members of the Collective, and you're listening to Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast.
All right, Dave. Wow, look where Khonshu has brought us. We are actually, I think he took me literally. We are actually in the Punisher's, one of his safe houses here.
Yes.
So
Good.
isn't this cool, eh? The battle van's gone, so Punisher is out. But look at this wall of guns here. Like, this is brilliant. Okay.
And army rations in the fridge too.
Exactly. Look, I'm going to take this little baby. Yep, looks like a Magnum. Watch out, Dave. Oh, I think that was just your shadow.
I'll be taking the Uzi. I always like the Uzi.
Take the Uzi. Give it a shot there at the windows.
Give it a random fire.
Yep. Awesome. Well, we might as well test them out while Frank's away. Okay, well, while we're here, and hopefully Frank doesn't return while we are here, because he gets a bit...
He'll be grumpy.
Yeah, he'll get a bit grumpy. He's a bit narky. We're playing with his toys. We have your final 2 books here. These are big ones, and Dave, you're going to have to guide me at least through one of them. I was a little lost in it, but I can appreciate the greatness of it. The first one we'll go to, I guess, is... let's do the Invisibles first.
Yes. Now, Ray, I appreciate that when you said to me to do my top 4, okay, The Invisibles by Grant Morrison is, for me, one of the all-time greatest series that I've ever read as a reader, and The Invisibles is a bizarre series to read, and in fact, I haven't read it in many years, so... it wasn't like I'd read it recently, but I always basically Invisibles was written by Grant Morrison around the same time he wrote JLA, which was about 96 to around 2000. I'm being rough with the times, okay? Yep. So in 2000, and Grant Morrison incorporated a lot of his own ideas and stuff into this, not only even his own life into this book. Yeah. And in 2000, he wrote this final issue set in 2012, which was kind of the year of if you remember, in 2012 it was the year that the world was predicted to end.
That's right, yep.
By a lot of different sort of religions and stuff.
Yeah, there was a movie as
Morrison's
well.
Always been really Yeah, it was a really shit movie as well. Yeah, but there was this comic was always kind of obsessed with that idea, and he just takes it in such a bizarre direction. Now, what I love is he wrote this in 2000 with his version of 2012, and so he jumped everything forward 12 years. So even when you were reading the series, it was a complete mind trip, this final episode, because so much had changed. Like, The Invisibles was a really changeable title from volume to volume. Like, Grant Morrison really shifted in tone a lot. Okay. And, I mean, this is such a difficult... Basically, to give you the basic pitch, I even went to Wikipedia to get kind of like the... basically, there's a character called King Mob, which was kind of basically Grant Morrison himself was the leader of the Invisibles at certain points during the run. And then there's the character Dane, otherwise known as Jack Frost. He's kind of like your POV character. He's kind of the guy, the teenager at the start. And it's his story at the end of the Invisibles. And basically, he's like the Messiah. He's predicted to almost be like the next Buddha. Yeah. And generally through the series, he's kind of tried to run away from the title, but he embraced it towards the end. Mm-hmm. And this is him basically cradling his friend in his arms who's dying in this sort of weirdly dystopian future mixed with, like... It's kind of a mixture of wish fulfillment future and just massive dystopia. Mm-hmm. And the Invisibles was this, for want of a better word, kind of... They're almost like anarchists. Mm-hmm. And they're fighting sort of like... For most of the series, they're fighting this thing called the Outer Church and the Arcanons. They're sort of like these creatures that come from outside reality. Yeah. And it's kind of a good versus evil battle, but it sort of becomes more complicated than that. And you realise that they're just another version of us kind of thing. And there's a lot of stuff about, like, there's a lot of themes to do with, like, a thing called the super context, which I never really understood. But it's basically the fictional world. So Grant Morrison was writing a lot about the relationship we have with fiction and that he has with fiction.
Wow. I mean,
and basically... It's a complete mind blow.
Yeah,
but
it is.
One thing this book has going for it, this issue, the Frank Quiley art, it pops, doesn't it?
It does.
Would you agree?
Yeah, that's what really stood out for me, because I hadn't seen something of that ilk for a while, that kind of style.
Yeah.
And it was very neat, very, very attractive.
Yeah, I mean, it's... Look, in terms of story, this is not the place to begin with the Invisibles, but I would say, though... when I'm giving my Desert Island picks, I actually have all the copies in trade paperback. Yeah. But I actually have a huge omnibus that's massive, and I'm not a big one for signatures. But a few years ago, I actually got Grant Morrison himself to sign it.
Oh wow!
And it was at some event. I forget what they're called. It was at the Opera House. Gerard Way was there as well. Okay. The guy from My Chemical Romance, who then wanted to do Young Animal and stuff, imprint.
It was like a writers' festival or something. Yeah. Was it?
Yeah, it was a thing. Him and Gerard Way doing sort of like a speech together kind of thing. And anyway, so at the end of it, it was really interesting. At the end of it, they had signing. And of course, like Gerard Way, Rockstar, had like 1,000, teenage girls, literally, to sign his stuff, like literally. Whereas Grant Morrison, I got right to the front of the queue real quick.
Oh, no.
And I was really sick. I had the flu. I'd really just come out of being seriously ill. And I carrying this massive omnibus. It's huge. It's the biggest omnibus I've ever seen. Yeah. And I brought it up to him, and I was just so embarrassed because I'm such a Grant Morrison fan. And I was just like, thank you so much for all the stories.
Great stuff.
I couldn't even say anything more than that. Yeah. And he goes, oh, it's cool, dude. Like, I just put out the messages and leave it to you guys to decode, something like that. He said, I was just like, oh, man, that's just too cool. Yeah. And he signed my book for me. And I'm not a big signature guy, but I just thought it was just so cool. And I'd only just recently finished reading it. But really what I'm saying is, honestly, Ray, if it came down to I had to pick one book, I would actually bring that omnibus.
Wow.
Because it's that good.
Wow.
The Invisibles is an amazing series. It really challenges you as a reader.
Yep.
And I just want to read out the end
of
it. Because at the end of it, Dane, Jack Frost, he basically breaks the fourth wall, but in a really cool way, and he starts talking to the reader.
Yeah.
And he's quoting his friend, and he says, "We made gods and jailers because we felt small and ashamed and alone," he said. "We let them try us and judge us, and like sleep to slaughter, we allowed ourselves to be sentenced. See now, our sentence is up." and that was the end of the whole series. And pretty much, I was never huge on the deeper themes, but basically, he was basically saying, like, the story itself continues on, and like, we are part of the story as we are reading, and then once the story is over, we still have to go on. Like, the story kind of doesn't end, but it changes shape. There's a whole lot of stuff in the Invisibles, and that's what makes it such an interesting story. And also, can I add, this finale actually does tie together lots of different threads from the entire series. Like, it's actually quite cleverly done. People think some people think Grant Morrison can't tell a coherent story. He actually does, and the Invisibles actually does have a very strong narrative, but he also is very experimental, and he likes to play sort of kind of have fun. There's a lot of fun in the Invisibles. It's actually a very fun comic. I'm not one of the guys, I'm a huge Grant Morrison fan, but not everything he's ever done is for me. Like, there are certain books of his that just haven't hit me. But the vast majority really has. But I think this was his purest vision that I've yet read. I think his Batman run is phenomenal. His Animal run's also awesome. And other stuff's great as well. But the Invisibles is kind of his own thing. And he did cool things in it, like, for example, when he was writing it, at a certain point, he got really sick. And he was in hospital, and he kind of basically had some sort of skin disease, and it was kind of eating away at his face. And he wrote into... And Grant Morrison's pretty full on, like, with how he interprets things. Like, he's pretty out there. And he wrote into the story that he cured himself of the... Because the character of King Mob, one of the lead characters, is him. Like, it literally looks like him, and, you know, it's designed to be his avatar. And he wrote into the story that he managed to cure himself from the story, and then he actually the actual disease went away in real life. Now, call it coincidence or not, that's the kind of vibe. I'm using a really weird example, but that's the kind of vibe he had. Like, it was all about an interaction between the artist and the art, and it kind of got quite... It's quite full on in a lot of ways. But there's a lot of layers to the Invisibles. To come in and not having read any Invisibles, this is a mind trip of an issue, but I thought you'd enjoy it for the cool art.
It was very good. Also, the other confusing thing, Dave, as well, was the numbering.
That is, I just find confusing. For some reason, Grant Morrison decided, like, in the last volume of The Invisibles was written in 3 volumes, although, confusingly, it's 4 volumes in trade paperback, in, like, the big deluxe editions, but it was always intended to be 3 volumes, and for the last volume of The Invisibles, Grant Morrison numbered it backwards. So I think it starts at 12, it goes 11, all the way 10, to 1. So the last one's 1. Now, I'm sure there's some reason for that, but what it just makes is confusing. But I guess it doesn't matter if you're reading in trade paperback. For sure. And because they're collected properly.
Exactly. And look, I'm not sure how much time you've got, Dave, as well. But did you want to go through this issue? Like, we can.
Look. I mean, I think the basic concept of this issue is, I would say to people, I'd more like, this is the story of Dane Jack Frost 12 years later after the main series action, and he comes to face King Mob, and King Mob is releasing a game called The Invisibles, which is going to basically spread sort of the very thing they were fighting all throughout humanity. So basically the Invisibles themselves are the same thing, from what I gather, are the same thing that they thought they were fighting, but it turns out they weren't really fighting it. Like, the Invisibles College and the Archons, or whatever they're called, are kind of different versions of the same thing. And it's all kind of like, it's almost a joke, really. And King Mob surrenders himself to the super context, and, you know, he becomes, I think, one with the fiction. I think it's something like that. Like, it's hard to describe.
It is very hard to describe.
It's better read. But it's also the story of Jack Frost and Dane, who does accept his role, and returns kind of to basically, he had this weird encounter early on in the series with this alien spacecraft kind of thing, and he has flashbacks to it at times through the series from memory. But it's kind of him accepting his role, and, like, when he faces King Mob, it's this moment where you realise the thing you thought you were fighting is really yourself, in a way, and there's not really a fight. That's the other part of the Invisibles. Grant Morrison actually has a pretty strong pacifist vibe. And King Mob at times through the series was kind of like a James Bond character. All guns and action, and, like, they were sort of like the anarchists, you know, against, like, this weird alien invaders. but then he became a pacifist and like he put away the guns.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the point of it. Like part of the beauty of this particular issue is it's written around 99, 2000, and it's really influenced by like a rave culture and stuff like that. Like the Invisibles got heavily, quote, the Matrix borrowed a lot of stuff from the Invisibles, and I use the word borrowed in inverted commas, like as in like basically like Grant Morrison was real pissed off about it.
Okay.
Yeah, like a lot of the sort of there's a lot of similar themes, and frankly, they're explored with a lot more depth in the Invisibles comic than the Matrix movies ever explored.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, like so, there's a whole lot of stuff like that. Like it's not just that King Bob isn't this traitor; it's actually the fact is they were never really fighting anything other than sort of themselves and their place in reality. Like it's kind of weird stuff like that. Like, and I love the scenes where his friend's dying in his arms, and there are scenes where he's at the rave, and these kids are just going crazy and stuff like that, and there's just beautiful scenes, and it takes me back to the time. And I was reading something from while I was getting ready to talk about this. I wanted to read, like I was trying to understand the actual final issue myself, and Grant Morrison was talking about it, and people were asking him, and he's saying, well, the future that I predicted in 1999 for 2012 didn't really come to pass. It's become a 90s retro future in itself, and that's fine. Like he was talking about that. He was saying, I was never really writing my exact prediction of what I really thought would happen.
Yeah.
You know, it was the prediction from the place I was there in the series I was writing. That was what it was. Like it's like we give everything, like you know, if we do a movie now about the 70s, okay, and it's a period piece of 1975, it's going to be a different movie than if something was done in like 1989 about 1975.
Of course.
We view the time periods differently from where we are, like sort of spatially. Stuff like that, like it's I'm not the guy who writes the thesis on it, but it's stuff like it's actually a really rewarding series to read from the start.
Yeah, I reckon you can write a thesis on this. This is it's quite involved.
Well, you know, I've to be honest, mate, I did a little bit of because I read it this morning and I haven't read it seriously for like close to 10 years, and I'm like, whoa, there's a lot of information here that I've forgotten.
There's so much that you can dive into.
But I'll say this, I'll put this comment out there, like. There are times when I was reading The Invisibles where I was like, are we really here? Like, I got to that point at one point.
It's a very
are we really here?
So like the Matrix kind of thing. Yeah, where you do question reality,
frankly, a lot better, you know, like and a lot more complicated because it's a comic, and the comic really lends itself. Grant Morrison in this series really lends himself to exploring those kind of issues while also having a really good time. Like, it's actually a really fun comic.
Yeah.
You know, that's what makes it cool. It's not this boring... I've made it sound really boring.
No.
It's actually a really cool action comic with a really cool narrative and, like, great art. Like, Phil Jimenez is on a lot of the issues. Steve Ewell's on a lot of issues. Frank Quitely does this issue. Like, there's a lot of good artists on The Invisibles. And each volume had its own flavour.
No, I was about to say, and I think, as you're saying, this story lends itself... You really need to... make sure that you explore the whole... Like, holistically, look at this story as well, because...
Definitely,
you know, one issue would be like just a thread in this whole tapestry of it. So,
well, I always thought of it like, dude, I thought of this at times in the 90s, like you could drop in to someone's house and sort of like just randomly, you know, someone you knew very tangentially, and maybe, you know, who knows, maybe you do a few cones, maybe you do some acid, maybe you do something, you pick this book up. No, seriously, and you pick, and in this really random sort of like weird way, you pick this book up, it blows your mind, you put it back on the shelf, and you walk out, and you never see that person again. But there's just been this weird moment of connection.
Wow.
It's kind of that kind of feel. Okay. Like it's kind of quite full on in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's leaning far out. And as Dave said, there's no real way to do this justice without you grabbing the issues itself and giving it a read. It's
grab volume 1 of The Invisibles and knock yourselves out, kids. I wouldn't recommend it to the kid who came to the swap meet. I think he's a few years off.
I'd imagine so as well. I mean, only because it's quite involved, isn't it? It's not what you'd expect. Yeah. Like, you know, that kid and a great kid that he was, I'd imagine be more into the action, you know, stuff like that. So.
And that's fine. And the cool thing is about The Invisibles, once you get to about 15, you can really enjoy it. The first volume of The Invisibles is actually pretty straightforward narrative fiction, with some trippy side elements. It gets more trippy the deeper you get into it, frankly. And this is probably the trippiest issue of all.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think I'm going to start. I'm going to have to start on volume 1. I'm just going to have to go through.
Start at the start. Man. That's where you've got to start.
Yeah, but brilliant. And I'm assuming again, this is great though, because what I get from your books, your ISLA books, is and nothing against the Punisher and all that, but you get that, you know, that popcorn kind of story with the Punisher, very straightforward, very cool in its own elements as well. But what you've brought to the table as well is the Invisibles, which is a mind-blowing kind of
if I'm going to be on that
opus.
desert island, dude, I want to have some period where I'm going to trip out. You know what I'm saying?
And
where Davey's going to have some time to really get lost.
I think the Invisibles will probably do it for you. So yeah, absolutely. And again, it's a 5, I'd imagine.
It's a 5.5.
5.5. Okay, we've gone trippy here. We've gone above it. 5.5. Brilliant.
Yeah, we've gone way above it.
Brilliant. And you mentioned, it's funny, you mentioned the stuff about the Matrix, and I'm just flicking through it now as well. And what I like with the certain effects that they do with, you see it from the Matrix, right? You know, you see versions of themselves as they move. If that makes sense, explain it.
Yes. And also a lot of the costumes as well, like a lot of the trench coat look and all that kind of stuff. Grant Morrison has a really good book that I'd recommend called Super Gods, which is a mixture of autobiography and basically a history of comics, like Western comics.
Oh,
it's really good. It's called Super Gods, and there's lots of cool moments in that book. Like Grant Morrison was a bit of a labour of love, actually, I think, when he wrote it. Like, he really spent some time on it. It's a prose book. But anyway, there's one period in it where he said something that I always remembered. I forget how many years. He either said 7 or 13 years. Every 7 or 13 years, according to him, things fluctuate between really heavy psychedelic themes and then, like, real bleak, modernistic, everyone wears black, kind of time cycles in kind of 13s or 17s.
Right.
And stuff like that's really cool. Like, for example, I read some Grant Morrison stuff back in like the late 80s where people heavily got back into psychedelia and the Beatles were really big at certain points, and he wrote Zenith. And then come the Invisibles, by the end of it in 2000, like, there was a really heavy sort of like modernistic black sort of theme, and then there was like moments where everyone was into like doing like, you know, in the 90s, like mid-90s, everyone was raving and doing stacks of ecstasy and stuff like that.
Right.
And like that was a big factor of how he wrote the characters at the start of the series. Like, stuff like that, like Culture's Cycle. And so the Matrix didn't just borrow stuff like the moving person. Like, a lot of the visual cues were also sort of allegedly taken. Anyway.
Yeah, great. No, it's a fantastic read, and again, Loonies, it's in the show notes.
Check it out, kids.
Definitely check it out,
kids. You know. And Seagull of Doom will be doing it soon too. So I'm going to bring Stu into this world. I can't wait to bring Stu into the world of the Invisibles. You know, probably have to sit him down. He's keen,
right?
So he mentioned just today. He mentioned that he wants to read the Invisibles, and I've never liked Stu more than when he made. I
reckon Stu would be. I mean, just listening to Stu and yourself on the Signal of Doom.
Stu will dig it.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think he'd really appreciate just the amount of depth that the Invisibles.
Yeah, he considers himself the brains of the operation, so I'm sure he will enjoy it. I sort of need it to be explained to me. I was reduced to reading the Wikipedia today to explain my own fucking favourite comic.
Well, it is. There is a level of complexity to it. So
especially when you haven't read it in like 10 years, and you're like, Jesus Christ, who are these characters again?
So absolutely, don't blame you there. And so now, Dave, we've got the final one for you, and I'd like to actually, if you don't mind, I mean, the Invisibles would have been a bit hard to go through, granted, because of the as we just explained, the story.
It's just hard.
There's a lot more of a linear thread here with Sandman.
Yes.
And so your last
Sandman issue 13,
your last and final ISLA book here, The Dollhouse Part 4. I just want to spend a little time talking about the front cover and the covers in general. They've been very synonymous with Sandman, I guess. Would you say that photorealistic montage of images?
I mean, I think that was like when Sandman came out. I was not that I was cool enough to be reading it when it came out, but that was a big part of its appeal. It definitely had kind of an adult vibe to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It always seemed like the smart person's comic, and it was one of those comics that was handed around in the 90s for a lot of people who didn't really read comics, and I hadn't read it until I picked it up, and it blew my mind as a comic.
I mean,
and I can understand what everyone was
raving about,
gushing about.
Exactly. I mean, if you do look at the time that it was written as well, I just said late 80s and through the 90s. And
late 80s into about 96.
96, And if we are to take broad brushstrokes and talk about the 90s in general as well, I'm going to lean towards Moon Knight again and look at Mark Spector Moon Knight, which was a good run in itself as well, but very much of its time.
Yeah, Chuck Dixon, wasn't it?
Like early on.
He wrote some of it.
Chuck Dixon, then Terry Kavanagh, and then J.M. DeMatteis.
Oh, John Mateus, good writer.
A good writer as well. Yeah, so but towards the end as well, with a Platt on art, there was a different vibe to the 90s. There was a typical taste in the 90s, and with
guns were big,
ponytails,
bounty hunters were big,
ponytails, pouches, trench coats, all that sort of stuff. And what you're saying, I guess, and it's true with Sandman, it kind of distanced itself from all of that. And it really does come across reading it now as quite a timeless piece of writing. Granted,
yes, I would definitely agree.
Yeah, granted, issue 13 is placed through centuries of time, so there's always going to be that level there. But to me, exactly as you say, it was a very adult kind of driven, very intelligent, sensible, very mature kind of
sophisticated
reading.
Yeah, literary.
Yeah, exactly. So. I don't know if you've got your copy here, Dave, over there.
I have it in front of me.
Yes.
Do you want me to give the 10-cent pitch?
10-cent,
okay, so basically, in this story, it kicks off back in the past, I think around the 1300s at some point, in a pub in England. And Dream, Morpheus, and Death, both dressed in the manner of the time, back in those medieval days, enter this pub where basically there's banter going on in the pub, and people are talking about the poll tax as being too high, blah, 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 all kind of modern events. And so there's one guy there called Hob who's just telling people dying's for suckers, basically, is his message. He's saying, everyone dies because everyone does it. Like, it's rubbish. Yeah. Death is stupid. I don't want nothing to do with it.
And now, if I can just stop you there, Dave, as well. I found that very odd. It actually kind of it kind of disoriented me straight away when I read that, because it was a very strange thing, like to bring up, I thought. But as you say,
well, it's just pub talk, isn't it? Like pub, people talk shit in the pub all the time over a few beers.
Yeah, true.
Well, I think that's kind of all it was. He's just venting to his friends, and he was just kind of putting himself above the common man, saying he didn't want to die. Now, it just so happens that Death is in the pub, like with Dream, and they're sort of talking, as we know, as well as being siblings, they're close friends. Death and Dream, like they're very close all throughout the series. And they're sort of listening to Hob, and Dream says, it might be interesting. And Death says, very well. Are you going to tell him, or shall I? And Dream says, I shall. And basically, he starts talking to the guy, and he says, did I hear you say you never had any intention of dying? And Hobb's like, oh, yeah, that's right. It's a mugs game. I won't have any part of it. And Dream says, well, how about we meet here again, Robert Gadling. It's Hob is what everyone calls him, but his full name is in the Tavern of the White Horse in 100 years. And Hob is like, yeah, sure, why not? And basically, Dream goes his way and Death goes her way. And then it cuts. Page turn. It doesn't even, I noticed, Ray, it doesn't even give you 100 years later. It just page turn.
No, it doesn't. Yeah.
No. And they're in the pub. And you can tell that time has passed because Dream, clothing and stuff, changes with the time period. So in the 90s, when Neil Gaiman was writing most of the comic, he's done in kind of, I guess you describe him kind of, he was designed to look like Neil Gaiman in the 90s, basically.
Yeah.
In black, kind of cool, a bit goth, you could say, a little bit alternative, but basically just a man of letters. And they're talking, and Hob realises that he can't die, and he has an age.
And sorry, can I also say as well, Dave, the it's quite subtle, the change of era. Like it's about 100, but like if you look at the garb and the clothing, it's not drastically changed. So it's very subtle. I found it was really good.
Yeah, I mean the change from the 1300s to the 1400s isn't massive, really. you're more noticing what Dream's wearing.
Yes.
You know? Yeah. And they're still just chatting, really. Like, nothing much has changed. She's talking about... there's a funny part where someone's complaining about chimneys and how it used to be back better in the day, and Hobbs saying, old idiot, I'm telling you, chimneys are brilliant. Yeah. Not having your eyes watering all the time, no freezing from the holes in the wall. Yeah. Like, Hob really enjoys living.
He does.
You know,
he does. And one of the big things, I think, with this as well, and it did surprise me going on, was how much he enjoyed staying alive. You know, there is that trope of the longer, you know, like the Wandering Jew and you know, that Melmoth the Wanderer as well. The longer that you live, the more tragedy you face and the more gloomy you get. It seems to be the opposite here. He's really enjoying his time under the sun.
Yeah, and I guess, I mean, the deeper we get into it, the thing is he has his ups and his downs, but he still wants to live. So anyway, they chat, and he says he hopes that they get rid of fleas with any luck next. And so they agree then 100 years? Oh, yes. So flash forward 100 years, and now we're in Shakespearean times, literally Shakespearean times. Shakespeare's in the pub talking to, oh God, what's the guy's name? Kit Marlowe, I think, another playwright from the time period. Yes. And they're chatting, and now Dream is very much dressed like, basically from the Elizabethan times. And it's all a bit more fancy, like the Renaissance. And Hobbs in the pub, and Hobb is very, very respected. He's a knight now. He's like, Hobb, Faith, that takes me back some few years. It's Sir Robert Gadling now. Yeah. Old stranger. And Dream is very kind of nonchalant, isn't he? He's like, you've had good fortune, I take it. Like, he's very much... good old Dream. He's always a bit smug.
He reminded me a bit of Blackadder in the Elizabethan time here.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. And so this is probably. I mean, Hobbs just loving life. He keeps saying it's so damn rich. Like the wine's rich, the food's rich, he's rich. And there's also, for Sandman fans out there, this is the period where Neil Gaiman obviously wanted to do something with Shakespeare, because Shakespeare turns up a couple of times in the series. Oh, okay. And Shakespeare's been dreaming of being like the world's biggest playwright, so Dream kind of gives him that dream in real life, basically. And there's a little section a little subplot here where he sort of goes and talks to William Shakespeare by himself, because William Shakespeare at the time is kind of a hack playwright who can't even get, you know, and Kit Marlowe, who was very well respected at the time, probably more so than Shakespeare, at least according to this, is kind of critiquing his work, and then Dream just takes 2 seconds to go and chat to Shakespeare, which is the funny part, because that's very much like subplot here.
Yeah, which was fun, because like we are familiar with the character.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah. And then we flash forward another 100 years, and this is a low point for Hobb, and he's actually he's almost barred from the pub. Yeah. And Dream says, no, let him be, he's my guest. And Dream obviously has some power over people. Power of dreams, and he lets Hobb through, and Hobb's like, I knew you'd be here. Do you know how hungry a man can get if he doesn't die but doesn't eat? Yeah. And basically he was kicked out of his house for being a witch because he didn't die, and he got complacent. He fought for the king in the Parliament's War, big mistake. He got careless, he got soft. I've hated every second of the last 80 years, every bloody second. Do you know that? And Dream says, and do you still wish to live? Do you not seek the respite of death? And Hobbs like, are you crazy? Death is a mug's game. I've got so much to live for.
This was a big turning point for me as well, because again, like, you're thinking, I thought this is surely the time, and Gaiman turns it on its head by having him, like, there's just
turns it on its head.
The perfect 4 panels at the bottom where there's a bit of silence from Hobb, and then he just says, are you crazy?
Fleas are literally gathering around him. And flies.
And he goes, it's a mug's game, and it's like, oh, this is crazy. But yeah, good stuff.
Yeah. Flash forward another 100 years, and now we're in much more refined times. We're getting far closer to the modern day. And basically, this is an interesting one, and I wonder how this would rate in today's politically charged climate. Hobb has become a slaver.
Oh, yeah.
And he's doing very well. He's doing very well for himself. I always found this a very interesting take. I mean, he's very refined, and... he's saying he saw King Lear yesterday. The idiots had given it a happy ending, and Dream says that will not last. The great stories will always return to their original forms. And Dream would know.
Yes.
And he says, that lad, Will Shakespeare, did you do some kind of deal with him, didn't you? What kind of deal? His soul? And Dream says nothing so crude.
Yeah, very good.
He just gave him his dream, I think. And there's a bit of a moment where people try to there's kind of a moment where people try to stick them up, and it's like an associate of John Constantine, one of his ancestors.
Oh yes,
and
right.
Basically, Dream and Hob escape, or not even escape. They just leave.
Yeah, Dream does. Yeah.
And then he says there's a very telling comment by Neil Gaiman at the end where he says, Dream says, "It is a poor thing to enslave another. I would suggest you find yourself a different line of business."
Yeah, so it's addressed by Dream here.
It is addressed. And fast forward the next 100 years, and
this is cool. I love this turn of the century.
Hob has given up slavery, and he's what's he doing? Because there was one part where he was doing printing. But I don't know what he's doing now, but he's doing well for himself.
Yeah, it was something very innocuous. What's he doing?
Just having a look.
Yeah, me too.
I'm not sure if he mentions it, actually.
No? Okay.
Well, there's something, though, because this is the part where he says... The interesting part is suddenly there's a character moment. Because one of the things for Dream is he's quite a distant character.
Yeah.
Like, Dream makes some very questionable decisions throughout the Sandman run, or has made some in the past. Mm-hmm. That get addressed throughout the run. And this one, Hob says, okay, I doubt I'm any wiser than I was 500 years ago. I'm older. I've been up and been down and been up again. Blah, blah, blah. And then he says, you were right about the slave trade. I can never make restitution for that. But listen, I've seen people and they don't change. Not in the important things. I doubt I'll ever seek death. But then he says, you've observed all that. You knew it from the start. I think you're here for something else.
Yeah.
And Dream's like, what might that be? And Hob says, friendship. I think you're lonely. And Dream just gets real kind of like pissed off. He almost looks vampiric in this age, you've noticed. He looks kind of like a Dracula figure. And like the old school Dracula. You dare call me lonely? And he leaves. And then Hob says, I tell you what, I'll be here in 100 years' time. If you're here then, it's because we're friends, no other reason, right?
Yeah.
And this is my favourite panel. It's amongst my favourite pages in all comics. The final page.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Can I just Sorry, can I just cut before there as well? So that was a very telling in the sense that it was, from what I took, very a reflection of Hob himself. He was projecting onto Dream about being lonely and needing friendship. Yeah, which was fantastic. I think it was a brilliant piece of writing by Gaiman.
It was interesting. Yeah. I mean, it was a stab in the dark, it felt like, from Hob, but then again...
But you see...
I mean, Dream is turning up as well.
Yeah, but you see his... I believe it's his true... That's what's been underlying Hob this whole time. Like, he's been saying he doesn't like death and it's a mug's game and he'd live forever and ever. But we actually finally see what's getting to him. And I think he himself is lonely, which he kind of projects onto Dream.
Oh, you think Hobbs lonely?
Well, I think that's where he got it from. He must have been self-reflecting as well. Yeah, and he probably finds that.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, really good.
Because certainly Dream doesn't give him anything in the panels we've seen to indicate that he's lonely.
Yeah, exactly.
We know from the comic itself. Yeah. We know from the comic itself that Dream is a distant and difficult creature at times.
Yeah, absolutely.
Either way, it works. But what I love is they cut to it's about 1990, 91, whenever it is.
Yeah.
It's full on it's the last days of Margaret Thatcher. It's a full on yuppie bar now, and all the chat is stuff like about the poll tax. There's stuff about the labour movement died with the miners' strike, very much mirroring what they were talking about in the very beginning back in the 1300s. No respect for law and order.
The dole.
The dole, and Hobbs there at the table looking like Mr. Yuppie, 1990.
Yeah.
Smoking a little cigarette with his little fucking craft beer, and then up turns the Neil Gaiman version of Dream, kind of modernised for the time period.
Look at the hair.
And Hobbs I wasn't sure you'd be coming, and Dream, who's basically got spiked out hair, says, really? Yeah. I've always thought it was impolite to keep one's friends waiting. Would you like a drink? And I think it shows the fact that Dream himself has loosened up over that time period.
Yeah, I believe so. And I think also in that statement as well, it shows a little bit of compassion that Dream has for Hob. Yes. Basically validating to Hob in an indirect way that yeah, look, you wanted a friend, and so what does he say? I've always heard it was impolite to keep one's friends waiting. So I think he did it in a very discreet way. It was kind of like saying, yeah, I know you're lonely, I'm your friend. And I think that was really good. That's how I saw it.
No, I'd agree. I think that's that's the reading. I mean,
yeah,
I think it's a fascinating comic. Like, and the first time I read it, which is why I selected it, it really made an impression on me. It's just a particularly good comic, and I've seen this done in other comics, but never done as well as this. Maybe because Neil Gaiman did it first, and I mean, he just did it very well.
Yeah.
I think this is an excellent comic. And the Sandman franchise has a lot of highlights. Like, it probably has about 7 issues that are particularly good, and this is definitely one.
Yeah,
of them.
and as we talked about the art before, and what I said before as well, I really do think this is a prime example of how the art really complements the sort of storytelling that he wants to give. Not in just the fact that it's a pretty bit of art and it just does the job. I think that it really conveys that their atmosphere in those times. Like, we're spanning hundreds of years here, and even at the last page with the in the 90s, I love the use of colour and the background that is just basically sketched, and then you're highlighted with Hobbit, the foreground with a bit of conventional colour. And then you have just the use of these like crimsons and pinks for it. It gives it a slight sense of modern compared to the other day, not the other days, the other pages.
It's slightly cleaner in look. It's slightly a cleaner look.
Really?
Yeah.
But
I agree. The artist has done a fantastic job in conveying different emotions and moods in basically the same setting. It's basically a very enclosed comic inside a bar.
Yeah.
And as you're talking, Ray, I'm flicking backwards through the comic, and it really is quite startling, the number of changes. And
absolutely,
Dream is actually the thing that changes the most.
Well, he's kind of like our anchor, isn't he? So we latch onto him because he sticks out because of his pale skin, but his attire is really he's the avatar, which really makes us know where we stand. But really beautiful stuff. And again, look, Gaiman is not afraid to obviously write a lot of text, but in no way did I ever feel bogged down by the text. It was it just proves how good a writer you can be. Where he's
a very graceful and gifted writer, Neil Gaiman.
Yeah, there is a level of.
Have you ever read his book, The Ocean at the End of the Lane?
No, I've read his other Neverwhere and all that, the Anansi Gods or something.
American
Gods as well. Yeah,
American Gods American Gods is fantastic. Yeah. The Ocean at the End of the Lane is also really good.
Right. Okay. Is it?
There's a scene in The Ocean at the End of the Lane where he basically references the period he was writing Sandman. And about how he goes back to this witch at the end of it.
Right.
She says, "You came here, when you were younger. You came here in your 20s, when you were lost in your dreams, and writing about your dreams." And he references it's a very powerful book, actually.
Oh, fantastic!
I think Neil Gaiman, in some ways, is kind of a magician the way he writes. I think he's a very graceful and gifted writer.
Oh yeah, he's one of my go-to authors to read books. I know that I'm going to enjoy a book from him. He's got a level of, it's not overblown, but he's got a level of lyricism to him as well as definitely putting all the structure in the story. As you say, it flows, and his language is really, really nice to read.
He's written some beautifully written. I'm not a huge short story guy, but I was on a train once and I picked up one of his books just for the train ride. It's called, I think it was called Fragile Things. Some fantastic short stories.
Oh, fantastic!
And I'm not a short story guy, but he just so good. Oh, really?
Actually,
the stuff that makes you think.
Yeah. Sorry, you still there?
Yeah.
Sorry. Exactly. Just you reminded me. I did read a lot of short stories of his as well. One of my favourites, and you'll appreciate this, Dave, because I think you own a cat as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I do.
What's the name of the little fella?
Wade.
Ah.
after Deadpool.
Okay, very cool. Look,
and he's crazy.
Yeah, I'd imagine. Well, named Wade. But there's a short story by Neil Gaiman I love. It's called Black Angel, I think, and it's about a family who has a black cat. and the cat, obviously comes inside every evening. It's got some scratches and stuff, and the family think it's just the cat, fighting other neighbouring cats. But what Gaiman does, he turns it on its head,
Sure.
and he describes it. The cat is actually warding off demons and evil spirits. And it's really, really noble and really cool to think that your little cat is going out there to actually protect the family and its members. And so, anyway, it was a short story, very well written. So...
I wish Wade would do anything so noble, but he would never would.
Probably, same with that cat. Probably not as noble as the Black Angel.
Wade dreams of catching a bird, that's about it.
I think reality...
But I agree. I mean, he's got so many good stories. There's a really good Neil Gaiman story I always remember. I think it's about Susan from the Narnia books, and it's kind of from her perspective in like the 1950s, long after the original boys and girls in the household have been killed in the train at the end of the Narnia series.
Okay.
And gone to heaven, whereas she's been left behind and she's like an old lady now.
Oh.
It's chilling. It's quite chilling. He's quite capable of sending a chill down your spine, Neil Gaiman. He's very, very, very gifted.
Very good.
As a writer.
Yeah.
And to be honest, has lasted a long time. A lot of people come and go, but he's lasted since the late 80s doing this to now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. He's
had staying power.
Yeah, he's been lucky enough to have his stuff adapted as well on the screen, and I think most recently...
Good Omens is coming out shortly. Good Omens is stuff he did with... what's the guy's name? God, I forget the guy's name now. I'm sorry. My apologies. But there's a very famous British writer that he collaborated with, who Terry Pratchett.
Oh, okay.
They did a book called Good Omens. It's now been made into a TV show, along with American Gods.
So it's
also made into a TV show.
Yeah, so it's great that he's got so much success because it's well deserved. I mean, as you say, he's one of the good writers. So Looney's. If like this wasn't proof enough, Sandman alone is something worth checking out, and we're lucky enough to have a large collection, and it's been rebooted or reignited again in DC, right?
Yes, he came back a couple of years ago now. Sandman Overture, which basically is sort of a prequel and a sequel to the series. I'd still read the normal series first.
Yep.
Yeah, read the normal 75 issues. I believe it's 75 issues first.
Yeah.
They're all very easily collected in trade paperbacks, and I've got it collected like 3 different ways. Right, I've got digital, and I've got the 2 Sandman omnibuses, and I've got just the trade paperbacks. And however you read it, I'm sure that if you like that kind of style, you'll love it. There's a lot there for readers to enjoy.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. And we'll put that on again in the show notes as well. And Dave, you and Stu will be reviewing it, I'm sure, sometime on the Signal.
Yes, Stu, just tonight, probably feeling the heat that I'm getting now that I'm becoming kind of internet famous, and, getting on shows like Into the Night. He's starting to jostle because he wants Sandman and Invisibles to get him to the top of the queue, and I said, awesome. Stu, I agree with you 100%, and he doesn't hear that very often.
He'll take it when he gets it. Yeah, absolutely.
He will. He sure will.
Again, sorry, Dave.
Oh, no, I was going to say, well, thank you for this opportunity, Ray. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And I hope people like my recommendations. And I do want to say there's no such thing as like a perfect kind of comic for everyone. These are just my kind of personal best of kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, I just want to put that out there.
Of course, and I think you mentioned that to me before. And like I said, I think the beauty of actually engaging with so many different loonies and podcasters like yourself is to see the variety out there, to see what people like. And as you say, what you see is like everyone loves different things, and that's the beauty of it. Exactly. And it's just,
I think that's really cool, actually, personally.
Yeah, just really good to see. And if it piques an interest to anyone out there, then so be it. And off you go. Be that little boy at the comic swap meet and start picking up your Sandman or your Invisibles, and off you go. And all the best to it. So, Dave, thank you so much for coming on. Once again, guys, Dave's on Signal of Doom with Stu, a weekly comic book podcast.
We're going global.
The Signal, and Dave is expanding across the podcast universe. Fantastic.
The world and everything in it.
Well, thank you so much, Dave. I hope you've enjoyed the Grant Mansion and, of course, the Punisher Safehouse or the Armoury. We still are
It's
here.
been an absolute thrill. I've got a feeling that Marlene's probably approaching the safe house now for a little rendezvous, and I say more power to her.
Yeah, exactly. Just quickly. So Looney's next phase. Just check the Over the Moon newsletter for that, and that will show you what we'll be up to in the next issue. Also, we can be contacted on itkmoonnight@gmail.com. Handle at Twitter, ITK Moonnight, and on Facebook we have a page, facebook.com/ITK Moonnight, and our Facebook group, which is facebook.com/groups/ITK Moonnight. We're also on Instagram, Tumblr, YouTube. Just search for Into the Night, as well as
You're
all
just everywhere.
Yeah, as well as all good podcast catches. This is the spiel that we always have to do. But anyway,
I'm taking notes.
But Loonies, just check us out. Drop us a line. Tell your friends it's all good, and check out Signal of Doom.
Hit like on Facebook. That's what it comes down to for us.
Yep.
You hit like on Facebook,
Yep.
And we're also on YouTube. So just focus on those two. You don't need to remember all this Instagram stuff. Just focus on those two.
Yeah, for sure. And look, as long as you connect up with Signal of Doom, it's all good. Dave,
My monthly tithe.
So-
I have a monthly tithe to members. Your firstborn.
Your firstborn. Okay. Well, I think I hear the roller shutter coming up. There's Frank. How you going, Frank? Sorry, we.
Hey, Frank.
He's a bit testy. I think we better get out of here before he wipes the floor with us. Thanks once again, Dave.
Thank you, Ray, and bye-bye, Frank.
And as we always say, may come true. Watch over the denizens of the night. Catch you later.
Moon Knight and affiliated characters, stories and events are properties of Marvel Characters Incorporated. Materials used and discussed within the podcast are intended for critique and review purposes only under the fair dealing concept of the current Copyright Act. The views, information or opinions expressed during the podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of the copyright owners.